Welcome to another episode of Blitz Growth. Super excited to have Tim Roven on the show today. He's going to share a ton of amazing value in creating niche products and how he turned a passion into a business. Tim found an incredibly interesting niche, which he built a very successful business around. The idea was to improve the gamer's immersion in tabletop role-playing games, TTRPG, for all of those guys out there that know what that means. This is games like Dungeons and Dragons, etc., those sorts of things. He did this by creating a company or a business called Tabletop Audio. In this episode, we cover how he found this niche market, how he identified a product that would fit into that market, so product market fit, and then how he started monetizing it so that he could turn his passion and hobby into an actual business. So Tim, thank you so much for joining.
Thanks for having me, Jack.
Okay, so I love asking this question first to all guests just to make sure that they know who you are and what you do straight out of the gates, first 30 seconds. So How do you explain what you do and the value you provide when you meet someone new?
I say that I create ambient sound effects and music for tabletop role-playing games, which is almost always met by blank stares.
Well, surprisingly, it is actually a huge portion of gaming. And the size of this, I suppose, segment or audience of people is actually ginormous. It's just not as front and center as some of the other esports gaming and that sort of stuff.
Definitely.
But it's still a massive industry. But you kind of even niche down further in there. So I know you kind of have a little bit of a backstory about how you sort of developed tabletop audio, but how did you discover this niche and then decide, hey, I should build a product or service for this? And, how did that even come about?
I want to tell you that I planned this all out, meticulous research and everything. And honestly, I've been stumbling from one thing to the next since I started. I was already doing music composition. My main job was corporate video and annual report DVDs. These things probably don't even exist anymore. I used to joke that it was called music for pie charts, and it was great, and it was bread and butter. And in about 2012, that market started to dry up, and I started looking around for other things. I had 2 young children at the time, and they were just getting to that age where I thought maybe I could introduce them to Dungeons and Dragons, which I enjoyed when I was in middle school and high school. And we played our first couple of games and they liked it. And I thought, it would be very cool. And at this point, I had not done any research. If I could play ambient sound design and sound effects and music and help them, be immersed in the game. So I cobbled together some of my old projects that I had done for clients and made a couple of 10-minute long loops, and we played it in our next game, and it was like instant. The level of their immersion and engagement was just astonishing. And I thought, oh, that's very cool. And at this point, I still haven't found out that this is a thing, that there are other people doing this. And so after a few more weeks, I decided to cobble together a website and put some tracks on there. And I went onto the Reddit, the RPG subreddit, and I said, hey, I did this thing. Maybe you'll find it interesting. And I honestly thought that would be the end of it. And people were just like, hey, this is great. This is really cool. I'm interested. What else can you do? Make one of these. And all of a sudden requests started coming in.
And so, and that's requests for audio.
Yeah. Requests for, I guess, scenarios. Like my game is centered around a boat. Can you make something on a boat? Stuff like that.
Okay. And
so I kind of developed this process by which I could create these, over years, create these sounds. And I decided against putting it all on YouTube, I guess, for some reason. There was something about being beholden to another platform. So I probably did the dumb thing and made my own platform, which made discovery just so much harder. Also, it was more expensive. All these things are probably not a good idea in the short term. In the long term, I think it may have been the right move. Yeah, and that's basically how it started. And the more people were interested in it, the more I created things. And then I, had to move on to the question of how do I make something out of this? How can I transition this into a business?
Got it. So really interesting. A few things there. So one, finding the product market fit seemed relatively easy for you actually, and leveraging Reddit to get that feedback was super valuable. So like niche Reddit communities, I agree, are fantastic for getting feedback and understanding whether something's good or not from the greater community. And definitely. I take it this was all free at this point.
The website. Yes. Yeah. Yes. The website is still 100% free.
Okay. Nice. And then, okay, so that's how you got your first traction. And then, in terms of YouTube, obviously, there's one way that a lot of content creators do monetize is through the advertising money on Amazon, not Amazon, getting all these giants mixed up.
Yeah.
YouTube. And so you kind of like opted out to build your own ecosystem really. And you thought that was better for the long run.
I did. I had this this kind of socialist experiment in mind where I wonder if this could work. I wonder if I could do something and have no sites that are covered in ads just sort of depress me, and I wanted it to be this very frictionless. You come to the site, you're like, what is this? Oh, let me click on one of these play buttons. Oh, I'm listening to music. Oh, it's all like this. It's all for free. So it was just supposed to be without any billboards or signs or anything. Yeah. So that was my intent. And I'm still sort of like in the process of like seeing how long I can keep this going.
Got it. And so the way that this got distributed was it started on YouTube and then it was pretty much just all word of mouth from there?
It's never been on YouTube.
Oh, sorry, not YouTube, Reddit.
Yeah. It started on Reddit. Yeah. And then for a while I did, I would post little, anytime I did an update, I would say, hey, there's a new track on tabletopaudio.com. And that was pretty much the extent of my marketing. I then made a Twitter account and a Facebook page, and actually did a Google Plus page. And
back in the day,
Google Plus had a very active role-playing game community at one time.
Wow.
So it was a big loss to the role-playing game community when that shut down.
Yeah, it's crazy to think that they just shut down that entire thing.
Yeah.
Just like out of nowhere.
Which really made my decision to create my own platform. Like I was like, oh, that can happen. I mean, I don't think YouTube's going anywhere.
Yeah. But no, it's peace of mind.
Yeah.
As well.
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. So then, you're saying no advertising, not on YouTube. So how do you currently monetize this so that, you can turn this into, your full-time gig versus having to, have your 9 to 5 and then do this in your spare time?
Right. So at the time, I think this was 2015, end of 2015, early 2016. And it was expected that you would, if you were in this space, that you would do a Kickstarter. And I thought about doing a Kickstarter, and actually that was my plan, to raise a bunch of money, and then I started thinking about what Kickstarter was, and it's about raising capital, and I didn't need capital. I've got a music studio, I have equipment, I can just do this right now. So what's the alternative? And Patreon was fairly new at that point, and I thought, well, maybe that does sound like a good idea. I will simply ask for a monthly contribution. And I even went so far as to create tiers, and there was no difference whatsoever among the tiers. Because honestly, I couldn't figure out how to make a difference among the tiers. So it was simply, if you can afford $3, if this is worth $3 a month for you, you should give me $3 a month. If this is worth 5, 10, 20, later on, I figured out that there could be actual slight differences between the tiers, but not much. And the main thing was that everything on the site itself would remain free for everybody.
Got it. And so when you had that kind of pay what you want model,
Mhm.
were most people going the lowest tier, or were people kind of actually being like, no, it's actually really valuable and paying those higher tiers?
There was a spread. Most people went for the lowest tier, and then some people figured out that they could actually go lower, and I didn't know how to turn that off. So I had like $1 plat, which each, honestly, I was so thrilled that anybody would pay anything that it didn't bother me. I was like, that's awesome. People will, just as an aside, people will write me saying like, I'm moving house, or I lost my job, I can't afford the $3 a month anymore, and it's just it's very heartwarming. I'm like, it's totally fine. Please, just, I want you to enjoy the free content, and if your luck changes, you can come back, and I'll still be here, hopefully.
Yeah. Yeah. Save that $3 for a cup of coffee.
Exactly.
Nice. And then how long did it take you to sort of make your first $1,000 through this project? Like, what was that timeline?
Oh, it was um, it was a few years.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it was very slow. Um, but during that time, I was using the site as kind of a business development to do work for hire projects.
Mm.
So I ended up doing
Yeah.
a lot of that.
Yeah. I've got a few questions later on down there about how, content creators or these small businesses can lead to other opportunities. So can't wait to dive into those. Um, okay. And then you kind of said that you found product market fit through Reddit. And then were there any other kind of niche communities or platforms that you were able to kind of get involved in, or you saw that your users were talking about your product a lot in?
Yes. So originally the idea was to create sounds for tabletop role playing games. But what I discovered was that it was really about storytellers. I realized who my audience was not the players of the games, the people who consume the end product. My audience was actually dungeon masters and game masters who want to use these tools to create their own world. Like they design their worlds, they design the characters, they create the ambience, they'll invite you to their table, put on the lighting, and they choose the music. So similarly, authors became a huge part of my community. Like fantasy, sci-fi authors would say, I put on your tracks, get me into the writing space, which was like a kind of head desk moment. Like, of course, authors are doing this because that's what a dungeon master is he's a storyteller, and anybody who's telling stories. And then the other one was, I did the occasional, vanity search, and I would find that I was on some teaching blogs, like K through 12 blogs, and teachers would. It was focus and also writing prompts. Teachers would say, I said, let's write a story, anything you want about, and they'll give them a prompt, and there was nothing, crickets, blank pages. And then they said, okay, well, let's put on some of this and now write the story. And it was just the same experience I had with my own kids, where all of a sudden ideas were flowing.
Wow. No, it's super interesting. And what were people doing before you kind of started publishing this and putting these audio soundtracks out? Like, what were Dungeon Masters doing before this, or were they just not playing any music?
Just wasting their time. No, no. They were absolutely, they were playing music. I mean, they were playing film soundtracks and video game soundtracks. And again, I didn't invent this genre. I'm not the first person to do it. In fact, had I done a cursory Google search, I would have come up with 5 other, sound designers and composers doing exactly this.
Mm-hmm.
But, it's like an author doesn't say, oh, somebody else wrote a book about romance. I can't, that's it. I'm done for,
Yeah,
it's like, no, but
all the romance books have been written.
Yeah. But this is my book about romance. These are my sounds and composition. So when other people, tell me they're interested in doing this, I'm like, you should do this. Like there's not one band, there's not one book. We can all do it.
Yeah. And audio is almost unlimited, really. It's
totally
so many variations. But the other thing that's interesting is it sounds like you also made the process a lot easier. So people were like patching together these different audio tracks from movies or songs or from wherever they're getting them from. Whereas your site, when you go there, so simple, straightforward. You can have music playing within like 5 seconds of loading the page.
Right. That was the goal, is to make a frictionless experience.
Got it. So that was your differentiator. That's how yours kind of outdid some of the other options that people had.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, I didn't honestly do a lot of market research. I just decided that this is what I wanted. If I were looking for something like this, I would want it to be this way.
Yeah, well, I think most businesses come from scratching your own itch. So
Yes.
I don't think you're the only one there.
Yeah, exactly.
Awesome. Were there any kind of mistakes that you made along the way that if you were to do it again, you were like, all right, I'd probably avoid doing this time around? Like, I know you mentioned the YouTube thing, but was there anything that you were like, oh, wow, that was a big waste of time?
I wouldn't say mistake. I think so. One of the things that I did on my Patreon, which really helped it to grow, was figure out a way to give. All right. So the problem was I wanted to give Patreon people an extra something, and at the time I was working constantly on this, and I didn't know how to do something more than what I was already doing. And somebody said, I love this track. I can't remember. I think it was a carriage ride with some music. And my game has actually got this scene in it, and I would love to use it. However, in your track, it's raining. Is there any way that I could get this track without rain? And it was just like, of course you can get a track. I will just mute the rain track and then render it out again. And all of a sudden, I realized that people want flexibility in their tracks. So what I do for Patreon is all the tracks on the site are a combination of ambient sound effects and music. So for Patreon, I now split them into just the music and just the sound effects. So if you want to have a scene set in the swamp and you don't like my sort of doom and gloom swamp music, and you want to have an action scene, you can take some of my action music or anybody else's action music and put it over the swamp again. And so you have this kind of more modular system.
You can mix and match.
So I came up with that concept way too late. But again, this is sort of the.
But you got there.
I did get there. I just stumble from one thing to another, and this came from a patron request. So
interesting. So listening to the customers.
Yeah.
Always a good idea for everybody listening.
Always a good idea. Yes.
Okay, that's super interesting. And then I know you said you section, or you found that your product is being used for a few different sections. Is that kind of also broken out in your Patreon? So you find that, teachers might pay more than dungeon masters, or writers might pay more than dungeon masters, and they have different tiers, or you're just bundling everything into kind of these 3 tiers and each one has custom mix and match music?
Everybody who signs up to the Patreon gets the at any tier gets the separate things. The different tiers often are. I have all the content I release is under Creative Commons non-commercial. So I have a pretty liberal policy, which is if you are doing a non-commercial podcast or actual play game and you want to use the audio, then you can use it with attribution. And if you are making money, if you're a for-profit podcast, and then this is where I kind of get all sort of murky, but in a good way. I say, if you're making a little bit of money, tons of people monetize and they're making, $25, $50 a month, right? And they take that money and they buy snacks for their group and they buy a couple of books and everything. Like that's not profit. That's just a little bit of, money that you're putting back into your thing. So don't worry about that. I would consider that nonprofit. So if you feel, in my website, I say, if you feel like you've crossed the line into profitability, and the important thing is that they decide where that line is. If you're making $100 a month and you're just spending it all, that's the same thing. So, and then we talk about a monthly licensing fee, which is not anything standard because I've never met 2 projects that are the same. So I'm like, I get them to come up with the licensing. What is it worth for you for a month? So then I say one of the things that you can also do is just move tiers in Patreon.
Okay, got it. Well, that's probably easier to manage.
Yeah, and there's so many of them that I don't have time. I never ask for accounting. I never ask for. I don't. That's not the
don't
business.
Want to deal with that.
I don't want to be that. That's the business I'm not in. Yeah,
no, that's great. And then, do you find that a lot of people are joining Patreon for the licensing feature of it, or they're just joining it because they want to support you?
I'm not really entirely sure what the breakdown is, unless you specifically say I've moved into profitability and I'm going to join you at this level. They might, they might not.
Yep. And I saw, I quickly took a look at your Patreon and I saw you do like a collaboration with another Patreon channel. How does that work?
Oh, I know what you're talking about. So there's a virtual tabletop platform called, that's the other Patreon, Moulinet, yes. So the virtual tabletop is called Foundry. So I license my content to a few virtual tabletops, which is more another, sort of income stream. I do Roll20, a tabletop called Multiverse, Quest Portal, a couple of other ones. Foundry is slightly different in that it is self-hosted. So you have it on your own computer. It's not a centrally located thing. So like, for instance, Roll20, I send them the content as I create it. They put it on their jukebox and they spread it out. So for Foundry, it was just more difficult. And I had a lot of Patreon patrons saying, we use Foundry. We want to have your product on Foundry. I was talking to the makers of Foundry. It wasn't really how to I didn't want to be in the marketplace because a lot of them will have digital assets in the marketplace. And like that doesn't feel, it's a bit disingenuous to charge some people. And is that a one-time
purchase?
Yeah, I think so. I didn't do it that way. Yep. So Moulinet came along, and they were a cloud platform that allowed you to stream content, and they do images and maps and tokens and all sorts of things from their servers directly into Foundry, and they use the Patreon API. So basically, what happens is you log into you open up your Foundry game, you click on the Patreon button, and it checks to see if you're a patron of Moulinet and Tabletop Audio, and if you are, then you can have access to all the content.
Wow, that's really clever. That's really, and are they the only guys doing that?
I did not come up with that. Yes, yeah, I believe so, and it's very specific to this particular platform.
Yeah, because I can imagine that would work quite well in most online gaming, like whether it be poker to esports stuff. Like I'm sure that kind of Patreon connection model would work in so many different verticals.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah. Okay, awesome. No, that's really cool. And so, breaking this down, you've actually got quite a few different income streams that you've generated from this. So you've got the Patreon, you've got the licensing, you've got kind of business that gets generated from projects. How many revenue streams do you have from this? This is pretty amazing.
They're all very small, but there's a lot. I'm trying to think. There's just random. I have a donate button on the site, which takes you to either a PayPal. So I'll just get the random $5 here and there from people. So I suppose that's another stream.
Okay. So they're at like 4.
Probably four. Yeah, the online licensing, the individual licensing.
Okay.
For streamers and then there's the work for hire stuff.
Yep.
Patreon.
The Patreons. Okay. And then donate. So 5. That's crazy. And, even if they are, I think one thing that content creators get stuck on is like they want to make a ton of money quickly or they want to make a ton of money through one stream. But in reality, a lot of the people we talk to, it's like multiple streams that are all making small to medium amounts. But once you add it all up, it's actually like enough to cover their wage or
Yeah.
cover their lifestyle to keep doing what they want for work.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to imply that I'm making lots of money, but what I am doing is this, and I love this more than I can
money.
say. Yeah, it's so much fun. I get up every morning, and it's just like I get to play around with the coolest stuff and make things.
And so, how do you actually make these audio? How do you actually make the audio?
Well, so there's the two components. There's the music, and that is I use lots of virtual instruments, orchestral sample libraries, synthesizers. I've got hardware synthesizers and software synthesizers and things. So combinations of all that. And then I'll just, have drums and things that I beat on in the studio. And the other part is the ambient sound design, which is a combination of I do my own field recording and Foley recording when I need to, but I've also, like most people, supplement with a huge amount of library purchases. So I buy sound effects libraries from various sound effects. I mean, everybody does this. I'm just not going to be able to get out to the desert to record, wind howling through cactuses. So I got to buy that.
You don't want to do a world tour and just go around the world.
I would love to
capturing every scene.
I would love to do that. And there are people whose passion is field recording, and they are on Patreon and doing things, and they're doing that world tour, and it's amazing. Yeah.
Yeah.
Just with sound design.
It's incredible. And then I know, audio, music, songs, artists, all that sort of stuff. The problem, I think there's a lot of problem with, duplicates or not having unique sounds or beats or whatever it is. Mm-hmm. How do you kind of make sure that all your stuff is unique?
I think unique isn't my goal. I think it has to be appropriate for what I'm trying to do. So, I mean, I guess anything that's going to come from me is going to have my print on it. But I don't spend a lot of time worrying about, that would require me to listen to other things and look at other things. And sometimes I avoid that, just so I'm not overly influenced. I mean, I love film music and I love, all kinds of music, but I try not to just do like pastiches. I've done, which of course I've done. But yeah, I try to just imagine how it would sound in my head. And if it sounds like if somebody else tells me it sounds the same, well, I use the same 4 chords. How could it not?
Yeah. Move on.
Yeah.
Okay. That's awesome. And then what sort of projects have come out of this passion project, I suppose, like the work for hire stuff? So what sort of things are people hiring you to do once they kind of find your website and they find that you're composing all of this audio?
Yeah.
What sort of things come out of that?
Well, a lot of published role-playing games will start on Kickstarter, and they will do a series of stretch goals, and I'm often one of the stretch goals. So if we get to X amount of dollars, we'll hire Tim from Tabletop Audio to compose X number of tracks. And so, yeah, and that's super fun. And then often I get to, I'll say, hey, can I use these tracks on my site, or a few of them? And almost everybody is very cool about it. And can I put them on the jukeboxes that I have licensing for? And most of the game creators want their games out there as, for people to play.
So you like name the audio track the game that it was created for?
Yeah.
Something like that.
Yeah.
Got it. Okay. So it's almost a good distribution channel for themselves, actually. It's just as beneficial for them as it is for you.
Definitely. I mean, I think so. Yeah. I like to think so.
Win-win situation.
Yeah.
Nice. Okay. And then, if you had all the resources in the world, money didn't matter, you could spend all your time doing whatever you wanted, what would you do next with Tabletop Audio? No time or money constraints.
I think it would just be more. I think what it's doing right now is is exactly what I wanted. At some point, I would like to put some more time into the website. The website has basically been completed for 3 or 4 years. I mean, in its current form, it's added to every week. But there are just things that I would like to kind of tweak and do things that are just beyond my skill set. So it would require probably somebody smarter than me coming in and helping me.
So like hiring a developer or someone like that.
Maybe hiring a developer, but honestly, it's lower on my totem pole than it used to be. Just because I found that people are they seem to be happy with it, and it works.
Does what it's supposed to do.
It does what it's supposed to do. Yeah.
Yeah. I think the best analogy to that is Amazon. You go to Amazon, that website looks terrible.
It's terrible.
But it makes the most money in the world.
Yeah, exactly.
So yeah, function over fashion. Okay, great. And then, just in general, where can listeners find more about you, what you're doing, upcoming projects, maybe Kickstarters you're involved in? Obviously they're going to go check out Tabletop Audio, but where else can they find you, what you're working on, and get in touch with you?
Well, my email is gm@tabletopaudio.com or tim@tabletopaudio.com. They're the same. And Twitter is @tabletopaudio, and Facebook is Tabletop Audio, and I believe that's it. I tweet weekly, sometimes more, a little bit more, but just about my new content, really. And I usually release content on Wednesdays to my Patreon, and then it goes into a sneak peek mode on the site. Oh, that's another thing that I actually did, which I realized that I wanted to give the Patreon people a little bit more. So I give them the new track ahead of the public track.
Okay. So they put that exclusivity.
It lags for about a week, and then eventually it comes out and it's free, and it's the same thing that they've had all along.
Got it. Which, if you do, I know it sounds like you do use social media channels, but out of all the social media channels, is Twitter the most successful one for you?
I think Twitter has the most. Yes, it's the one I interact with the more developers of games and authors and things. So I would say so, yeah. And it's got a very active. I mean, Twitter has problems. I mean, even in the tabletop role playing game space, there's there's awful drama, like there is everywhere in Twitter. I mean, I'm not even on politics Twitter, and it's just sometimes I have to just close it down.
Yeah. Limit yourself to 30 minutes a day.
Yeah, that's pushing it for me. But nice. Yeah, I would say Twitter, for the most part, has been very friendly and supportive.
Okay. Yeah. Great. Well, guys, you heard Tim. Go hit him up on Twitter if you have any questions, or you're interested in learning about how he turned his passion into a business with multiple revenue streams. And hopefully you enjoyed this episode. So don't forget to subscribe. Let us know if you're enjoying this, or if you hate these episodes, let us know either way. And really appreciate you guys listening. Thank you so much. Have a fantastic rest of the day. Hey guys, we put a bunch of effort into making great content for this YouTube channel. So please hit subscribe, leave us a comment, hit like, and tell a few friends about it.